Hello everyone and welcome to the 3 p.m. bake along, not at 3 p.m, at 12 o'clock. The reason we are starting at 12 o'clock today is because we are making bread, and bread needs time, and we need time on a Saturday afternoon to chill out and do nothing. So we're going to get our baking done early in the day, get our beautiful cinnamon buns made, and then we can chill out, and that's what we're going to do. So we're starting at 12 o'clock. This stage is preparing our dough for our cinnamon buns. Then we're going to leave it to rest for an hour. Then we're going to come back, shape and fill our dough, leave it to rest again, and then we're going to come back, hopefully around 3 o'clock if the timings work, and bake it. So this is step 1 of cinnamon buns. That's right. Now, I will be making vegan cinnamon buns. The reason for that is I actually prefer the texture. The texture to cinnamon buns is slightly softer and a little bit cakier than a normal cinnamon bun. However, I'm going to tell you the substitutions, so if you want to make normal cinnamon buns, a nice American classic, then feel free. However, it could get quite confusing if I keep having to tell you the differences. So I'm going to explain the substitutions to you first. Then as we go along, I'll just be referring to everything as I am using it. Just makes it a bit simpler, because this sometimes if you're a baker and you're not used to baking and things, even if you are a baker, this recipe can be quite scary because it can seem quite tricky, but it's not. It's simple. It's just like every other bread recipe that we have made. So I don't want to overcomplicate it, because you can do this. We can do this. The only other thing that I need to tell you is, if you are making the vegan version of this recipe, the kneading portion is really, really tough. The vegan dough needs an excessive amount of kneading. So I'm going to cheat, and I've got my trusty stand mixer here, and I'm going to use that to start off the kneading process. It's going to cut about half an hour off my kneading time, so it needs doing. And I urge you to do the same if you are doing the vegan recipe. Now, you may not have a stand mixer, however, if you have an electric hand whisk, I guarantee you will also have a whisk with something attached to it. You will have an attachment that looks a little bit like this for your electric hand mixer. This is a dough hook. Now, every single time I've ever bought an electric hand whisk, I always take these off and chuck them in a cupboard or chuck them in a drawer, because I never think I'm going to use it. You can use this today. You can use your electric hand whisk to the full potential that it is made for today, because this is going to save you a heck of a lot of time. That is if you are doing the vegan recipe. If you're doing normal cinnamon buns, then it's just the same as a normal bread dough. It will need some kneading, but not an excessive amount. So let's get started. I'm going to wash my hands first. I've been out doing my deliveries today, delivering my cake and some scones to all the family. Oh look, I've neglected my flowers today. I've neglected my plants and I haven't watered them. I'm just going to water my peppers and my lettuce. Just watering my lettuce, everyone. Don't worry. Right, hands are washed. Now let's go through these substitutions. So, your normal cinnamon bun dough requires butter, milk and eggs, as well as the usual bread flour, salt, yeast and yeast. No water in this. So, those are the 3 things we need to substitute. Milk, eggs and butter. Butter, eggs and milk. Our substitutions for those are soy milk. I'm using light soy milk because that's what I've got, but any kind of soy milk, almond milk will also work. In fact, any kind of dairy-free milk will be fine. For our butter substitute, I'm using Trex, dairy-free spread. For our egg substitute, I'm using coconut oil. Now, you can use different substitutions for your egg, but I have used coconut oil in the past and it's worked for me, so that's what we're going for. So that's what we're substituting. Soy milk for normal milk, whole milk, Trex spread for butter, and in the place of eggs, coconut oil. So as we go along, just remember those substitutions. I am going to just stick with what I'm using to make it a bit less confusing. Everything else is exactly the same. So let's get cracking. Now, the only other thing that has been different and will be different is the type of yeast you are using. I am using dried active yeast, which needs reactivating. If you are using easy bake yeast, you put it in dry. So just remember that. If you're using easy bake yeast or fast action yeast, don't reactivate it in your liquids, just put it in with your flours. And that's all you need to do. I'll be reactivating my yeast. So if you're using dried active yeast, do the same thing. If you're using fresh yeast, then you also put it into the dry mixture. Right, let's get cracking. So, we are not adding any water to this recipe. All of our liquids are in our milk, eggs and butter, so we don't need any water. So, we need to activate our yeast in one of our liquids, our milk. What we are going to do is we are going to measure out our milk, of which we need 200 mils. We're just going to measure out a portion of this to activate our yeast. So, we're going to put in 100 mils of our milk, and we're going to warm it up because it's just come out the fridge. So, with any bread recipe, the essential thing is to keep the balance of dry to wet ingredients accurate. If your recipe calls for 200 mils of milk, you can only use 200 mils, which means to activate our yeast, we have to use a portion of that 200 mils. These are the things that you can remember as you go along, and that way, any bread recipe you do, if you remember these tricks, you can't go wrong. So, 100 mils of our milk is going into our jug, and we're going to warm it up in the microwave. To activate yeast likes warmth, and yeast likes sugar and all those lovely things. So to activate it, we need a little bit of warmth into our milk. It still will activate in cold milk, but warm milk is going to help it along. It's going to help it to activate. However, just like when we are activating in water, we can't have it too hot, because if we have it too hot, we will kill the yeast. Also a thing to remember. So, get that back in the microwave, give it a little bit of warmth. All I'm looking to do with that is just take the chill off it. It's come straight out of the fridge, so we just want to take the chill off the milk, not get it too hot, just warm it up ever so slightly. So I'm only putting it in for 10 seconds at a time. Okay, now that's feeling a little bit warmer. A great way to test if your milk or if your liquids are the right temperature is just dip your finger in, and you shouldn't really feel the temperature. It should be the same as kind of body temperature, which that is. So our milk, of which we have used 100 mils, is nicely tepid, not too hot, not too cold, just a nice body kind of room temperature. Now, we're going to use a bit of our sugar to activate our yeast. However, in the same way as we do with our milk, we don't want to put any extra sugar in. We just want to use a portion of what we are using for our recipe. Our recipe calls for 4 tablespoons. So we're just going to use half of one in our milk to activate our yeast. And we'll take that off when we add the rest in a little bit. So it's all keeping to our recipe. These are good little tips. Whenever you look and make a bread recipe, if you use these little tips, stick to your recipe, don't use any extra, take from that to activate your yeast. You'll never go wrong with bread. So, half a tablespoon is going into my lukewarm milk, and I'm going to mix that in. That's going to help to activate my yeast. Okay, so let's add the yeast then. We need 7 grams of yeast. If you're using fresh yeast, you need double, so you need about 15 grams for fresh yeast. And remember, fast action or easy bake yeast does not need to be activated. You add it into your dry ingredients. So, 7 grams of our yeast is going in to our lukewarm milk and our sugar. Perfect. Now, give it a little bit of a stir, a little bit of a mix in there. And we're going to leave that to one side to start activating. And that's going to bubble up, froth up and bloom. And that's how we'll know it's ready. Leave that to one side. Now, I'm going to bring up my video because I haven't done it yet, so that I can see any comments and make sure everyone is doing okay. What a lovely hot sunny day it is. It's going to be a scorcher. So we don't want to spend too long in the kitchen, do we? We want to be out in that sunshine. So, next thing we need to do is we need to prepare our other liquids, because our other liquids need to be combined and need to be in liquid form. So we need to melt down our butter and we need to break up our eggs if you're using eggs. So if you're using 2 eggs, give them a little bit of a scramble so that they're nice and broken up, and then melt your butter. Right. So, I am using my Trex spread and I'm going to measure 100 grams into a microwavable jug. Woo! 100 grams going into my jug. There we go. This is your butter element. Butter element, whichever you are using, is going into our jug. Oh, this is good. I'll be able to use up all of my Trex spread because I don't like to have things wasted. So this way, I won't be using this for any of the recipes soon. So this uses up all of my lovely Trex spread. This is going to be exactly 100 grams. Like it was meant to be. Oh, 99. Wait, I can get some more. It's like that advert for butter when she uses the earbud to scrape the last of the butter off. 100 grams. I'm going to tilt my camera down so you can see what's going on. Exactly 100 grams of whatever butter you are using. And now we're going to add to this we're going to add to this the rest of our milk. So, altogether we need 200 grams of milk, 200 mils of milk. I've used 100 to activate my yeast, so the next 100 is going in here. So 100 grams / mils of milk. With very runny ingredients, grams and mils are the same. Doesn't always work with more viscose liquids, but for milk, it works. So 100 mils is the same as 100 grams. Right, so we've got our butter and our milk in a microwavable jug, and we're going to microwave it. Pop it in there, and it's going in for about 30 seconds. All we want to do is break down that butter and get it incorporated into our milk. It also warms it up a little bit, which will help to activate all around our ingredients in our bread. So we're melting down our butter into our milk and we're warming up both of those ingredients. 30 seconds should be plenty. Your butter will probably melt a little bit quicker than my vegan butter, so just keep microwaving it a few seconds at a time until it is all melted. You don't want your mixture to get too hot, so try not to let it get overheated. Otherwise, again, we're going to kill off our yeast. So just pop it in for a few seconds at a time until it's all mixed up. Now, your egg. Get your eggs into a little bowl and give them a little bit of a scramble. I am using coconut oil instead of eggs. So if you are using coconut oil like me, you need 60 grams of coconut oil. So 60 grams is roughly the equivalent of the weight of 2 eggs. It's a little bit less, but it does work. So 60 grams of coconut oil. Oh, nearly. 60 grams of coconut oil. And we are going to melt this down a little bit as well, because just as eggs are a bit of a kind of thick liquid, that's what we want from our coconut oil. So, coconut oil measured out, 60 grams. And we're going to melt that down once our butter mixture has broken down. Now again, you only want your butter to melt. You don't want it to get too hot. You don't want your milk to get too hot in there either. So keep an eye on it. And once it, oh, splash myself, it's terrible. Once it's started to melt, it's done. Now, I've still got some little chunks of my butter in here, but for me, that's absolutely fine. It's not all completely runny, but it's all incorporated to the milk, and there's only a couple of little lumps in there, which will be nice and warm and will break down when we add it to our dough. So that is perfect. I'm going to leave that to cool down a little bit. Make sure your butter and your milk doesn't get too hot. If it gets too hot, leave it to cool down before you add it to your other ingredients. Now we need to warm up our coconut oil. So, if you are using eggs, you don't need to microwave your eggs. Just a little reminder. So, let's get our flour ingredients measured out. Let's get that back to 0. We are using half and half bread flour and half plain flour for this recipe. Gives us a bit of a softer dough, keeps it in like a cakey form rather than having it as a drier bread. So we are using 250 grams of strong bread flour, 250 grams of strong bread flour, just over. We want to be precise with this. 250 grams of our bread flour and 250 grams of our plain flour. So it's half and half. Now then, I've got a tear in my plain flour bag. So 250 grams of strong flour and 250 grams of plain flour going into our bowl. Now, I've just realised that I should have measured this into my stand mix bowl, but it's not to worry. I can pour it over now. There we go. Be careful, there's a big rip in my bag. Put it in its quarantine bag. Great, so, what on earth is that? Got a little bit of specks of something in there. Let's remove them. I think it's come off the bag. Fabulous. Right, 500 grams of flour altogether, 250 strong bread flour, 250 plain flour. I'm going to pop that into my stand mix. Save this bowl though for resting our dough in. Right, our flours are measured out. Now what we need to add into that is salt, because even though we are making a sweet dough recipe, you need a little bit of salt to balance out the flavour. So we are putting in a teaspoon of salt. Now I'm going to guesstimate because I'm using my little grinder here. But you just want a teaspoon of salt, and that's just going to balance out all the sweet flavours in the recipe and give it a bit of a nice edge and a nice balance. 1 teaspoon of salt, and then we need to add the rest of our sugar. So we put in half a tablespoon of sugar to activate our yeast. So to make it up to 4 tablespoons, I'm going to do another half and then 3 more tablespoons. Now we don't want them too heaped, so that's the kind of heaping you want, just a tablespoon. Nothing, you don't want to be extravagant and be getting this ginormous tablespoon, just a kind of nice even tablespoon. We want 3½ tablespoons, that's if you've used half of your sugar to activate your yeast. 4 tablespoons in total. I know, my microwave is beeping at me. So, I've microwaved my coconut oil until it is all running. That's perfect. I tried to look for something that had a similar consistency to eggs. So I didn't want to use the same ingredients that I've used, so I used coconut oil. It's got a similar texture and it has a nice flavour. So we've just put our sugar and our salt into our dried ingredients. This is when you can add your fast action or easy bake yeast if you're using it. Add it straight in to your flour. Great, so we've got 500 grams of flour, half and half, bread flour and plain flour. We've also got a teaspoon of salt, and we've got 3.5 teaspoons of sugar in here. This is where our other half is, in our fabulously activated yeast. It's lovely and frothy and fabulous. You can see that. So that's all we need. We've got our butter and our milk that we've warmed up and liquefied, and we've also got our eggs or coconut oil. We're ready to make our dough. So let's do a little check. Butter and milk, egg, flours, yeast, sugar, salt. Done. So I'm using my stand mixer to start off the kneading process, because it is going to take some time, I'm not going to lie. Right, let's add it all together. Where's my trusty spatula? We're going to put in our milk and our butter. Milk and butter going in. Make sure you scrape all of your milk and butter mixture into your flour. Scrape it out there. In it goes. Sublime. Then our egg, coconut oil. I'm going to make sure it's not too hot. No, it's fine. Egg / coconut oil. Scrape that in as well. There we go. Then our fabulously bloomed, wonderfully activated, frothy yeast mixture. That's going in just like that. In it goes. Wow, my yeast is activated really well in that milk. Just shows you what a difference using milk instead of water. Great, so that's our dough. Let's give it a bit of a stir, mix all those ingredients together, and this is going to start to come together into a dough. Now it will be quite sloppy, but don't worry, we want it to be sloppy. The sloppier the dough, the softer the buns. Right, give it a good mix. Make sure it's not sticking to the edges. Now, if you are kneading by hand, you want to turn this dough out onto your kitchen surface and get kneading. If you need any tips on the kind of kneading techniques, then there's many, well, there's about 4 bread videos on the group. Give this a bit of a pause and go and have a look, but I will be going over it in a little bit once I've started off my dough in the stand mixer. So, if you are using an electric hand whisk, get your hook attachment onto your electric hand whisk, stick it in there and start mixing. I am going to swap out, swap out my, is that some sort of smoke coming out of that? That's weird. I'm using my dough hook on my stand mixer. Pop that on there. Bowl in, and we are going to mix it with our dough hook for 5 minutes exactly. We'll put it onto a medium speed, and I'm actually going to set a timer. Where is my timer? Here it is. 5 minutes on the clock. And what this is going to do is it's going to speed up the kneading process. So this is doing the very same thing that I would be doing by hand, but it's just doing it a lot quicker. If you are doing it by hand, if you're doing regular buns, it takes about 15 minutes, so you want to be stretching and folding and stretching and folding your dough for about 15 minutes. If you are doing the vegan dough, oh, it's trying to escape. Get back in. Oh my gosh, that's never happened before. If you're doing the vegan dough, get back in, oh my gosh, then it takes ages. It took me, when I made this for the first time, it took me like 40 minutes to knead my vegan dough. It was I never thought it was going to work, but it did. So if you are kneading your vegan dough by hand, you are going to need to pause your video and just keep going at it for a good 40 minutes. My dough, get in there. Yeah. So this is going to speed up the process for me. Whoa, medium speed, not too high. And it's going to do some of that stretching and some of that pulling for me in the machine. It just looks like a big sausage. Get back in, sausage. Get back. Now, ooh. You know what, I might leave that there and see if it's helpful. Get in. Ooh. God, wayward dough. I might lose an arm. Oh, okay. Carry on. Yeah, when I first made this, the dough is very sticky and it's very soft and it breaks apart. Not like a bread dough at all. But the more you work it, the more it turns into a bread dough. So persevere with it. I know it's a pain, but it'll be worth it in the end. The machine is just speeding this up for me. So it's kind of taking all the hard work out of it. If you're using an electric hand whisk with a dough hook, then just keep mixing. Keep mixing for 5 minutes. Oh, make sure your dough doesn't try and escape. It's already looking a lot better than mine was. Just needs 5 minutes. Best way to tell, just set an alarm for 5 minutes, and that's it. You will also need something to cover your bowl for when we rest our dough. Back in then. I've got my bowl and my trusty shower cap, which is no longer a shower cap, it is my dough cap. It's all I use it for, don't use it in the shower. Dough cap. So get your bowl ready. Make sure you've got some cling film so everything's hot. I'm going to put my yeast back in the fridge. If you use dried active yeast, keep it in the fridge. Because if you keep it in a cupboard, it goes off. Hi dear. We're making dough. Trying to come in and say hello. No, he's naked, he can't come in, he's just got out of the shower. Hi Rich! It'll be fine, look. Absolutely fine. Stick it in there. It's behaving a bit better now. Ooh! Kind of. It's not like when I used to stick the knife with a toaster. Are you alright? What are you after?
Car keys.
Car keys. Are they on the stairs? We're making cinnamon buns. This is great. See, I would be using all of my energy to knead this dough, but I don't have to. Stand mixing is doing it for me. I'm trying to escape again. Now, even after this 5 minutes, I'm going to need to knead this a little bit by hand, but it's just speeding it up for me. Now that you've said stop it, I don't want to. It's fine, I've done it before. If it doesn't explode. I need like just a lid, I need the lid attachment so that keeps the dough in. Sure, it'll be fine. Keep going anyway. 1 more minute on the clock. I'm going to clear my southern area. Because I most likely will need to knead this a bit by hand as well. How's everyone? Did you enjoy the VE Day festivities yesterday? I had a very nice day, followed by a very drunken family quiz. I wasn't drunk, but my brother and his wife were. We also had a crazy storm last night. Did anyone else have like a crazy storm? There was hail coming down the chimney. Okay, that's 5 minutes. 5 minutes has gone on the clock. So, it feels lovely. It feels nice and warm. So, if you are doing, bear with. If you are doing, hang on, I've got a problem. If you are doing vegan, Jim, if you're doing vegan buns and you've used a stand mixer, stay on there. Then take your dough out of your stand mixer. Oh yes. Now, if you can see this, for anyone making vegan dough, if you're kneading it by hand and you feel like it's never going to turn into what it should be, it does, it really does. You've just got to persevere with it. I mean, this is almost done. I'm just going to give it a little bit of extra. So we're stretching it and folding it. Because of the dairy substitutions, mostly the oil, the gluten in the flour doesn't come together as quickly as a normal bread dough. And obviously we've only used half bread flour and half plain flour, so there's not as much gluten in there. But it does come together and it does work, and you end up with the most beautiful soft buns, so it's worth it. Just keep working at it. We'll do our slap technique as well. Slap and fold, slap and fold. Now, let's test it like we would a normal bread dough. We'll pinch the edge, give it a shake so that it stretches, and we're looking for kind of a window pane thing so that it stretches out thin enough that you can see through it without tearing. Now this is tearing ever so slightly, but not very much. So I'm going to keep kneading it for a little bit because it does needs a little bit more kneading. So if you've used a stand mixer or maybe your hook attachment on your hand mixer, then continue to knead your dough for a few minutes, because if it's tearing apart still, it's not quite ready. So keep going with it. The nice thing about this dough, because it's got a high content of oil in it, it doesn't stick to your hands or the surface. It's got its own non-stick kind of little contingent in there working for us. So knead your dough a little bit, even if it's come out of your stand mixer. I mean, it doesn't need much more, and we don't want to overwork it, so we're just going to give it about 10 minutes more kneading it, and then we're going to leave it to rest. That's the most fun bit. Give it a slap on the surface. Again, I apologise if you don't have the ability to mix your dough in a stand mixer or with a dough hook, because it really takes a long time to get this vegan dough ready to rest. But it's worth it. They are going to taste absolutely sublime, so just remember that. Remember that as you're working your dough. Just think of those beautiful, doughy, moist, terrible word, cinnamony, sugary, beautiful buns. And that will keep you going. Slap your dough on the side. If it stretches but it holds together, it's nearly there. Just needs a little bit more attention. We don't want to see any tearing. The dough should be beautiful and smooth. Shouldn't be tearing. Oh look, it's two-handed kind of motion I've got on the go here. Just folding and stretching. Ooh. Making sure that it all comes back together. It's definitely getting there, but it just keeps liking to tear. And I remember when I first made it, it just literally would not come together. I even think it was maybe an hour that I was kneading my cinnamon bun dough the first time I made it. It's just absolutely relentless. This is one of the fun things about making bread, is you can just pulverise it any way you like. Jim's watching football, trying to have a normal Saturday afternoon. I think he's watching one of the old World Cup games today. Whoa. Don't know who, but that's how I'm a football fan. You wonder what that was? Oh, that's me being a football fan. You're going home in a body bag. I had to learn all these slurs when I went to the villa for the first time a few years ago. Great fun. You're going home in a body bag, la la la. We hate you, the other side. I think I greatly amused the other football fans around me. I was like, yeah, yeah. Wasn't that fun? Oh, they're terribly good at this game, aren't they? I think I drove them all nuts, but I had fun. Right, keep going. Kneading our dough. If you are using the normal cinnamon bun dough recipe, you will not need to carry on kneading your dough. Your dough should be absolutely fine and ready to rest. But do the test if you're unsure. We'll do it now for you to show you. Pinch a big chunk of dough, let it drop, let it stretch, and you're looking for it to be thin enough to see through without tearing. Now this is already a lot better, but see how it's tearing in the middle? We don't want it to tear, we want it to be stretchy and hold together. Your dough, if it holds together, you can see through it and it doesn't tear, then get it in a bowl, cover it with cling film and leave it to rest for an hour, because your dough is done. Woo! I should have left it in the stand mixer for a bit longer, shouldn't I? Saved me all this muscle time. Right. Yes, very much enjoyed my little stint singing yesterday with the Boogaloo Babes. It felt like a normal set, like a normal gig, like we were all together, even though we were not. It was good fun. No, if you didn't see it, head over to the Boogaloo Babes page. All the videos are on there. Woo, bit of something different. Woo, right. Oh, I'm getting loads of stick that my flag, my Union Jack was the wrong way around. It was not the wrong way around, but as you all know, when I video things in selfie mode, it flips the picture around. Should have really thought of that, shouldn't I? Right. Even like Anya, who did her set on her doorstep, she couldn't even turn it the other way because all the neighbours would have said it was the wrong way around. You just can't win, everyone. You just can't win. Right, keep going. This part is very time consuming and very labour intensive, but this is the foundation that makes our bread dough perfect. If you skip this step, if you shirk on your duties and you don't put the energy in, your bread's just not going to be as good. So, it's like life. What you put into it, you get out. If you don't spend the time kneading your dough, then it's not going to be as good. That's fun. Boom! Oh, I like that. Boom! The dough enjoyed being pulverised, I promise you. Going left side, going wax on, wax off, wax on, wax off. Woo, wax on, wax off. Down, 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 stretching it, stretching the dough and folding the dough. Stretching the dough and folding the dough. That's what it's all about. Fix my glasses. I'm getting so hot and sweaty. But look at our dough. Our dough is changing before our very eyes. It's becoming smoother. It's not tearing as much. And that is exactly what we want. Boom. It's going to be nice and smooth. Ow. It's distinctively like smacking a bottom, which is weird. How would I know this? Ooh. I'm kneading my dough, giving it a slap. Slap that dough, slapping the dough, slapping the dough. Whew. Right, okay. Feels good, feels good. It's got a nice smoothness to it now. Look at that. See how the surface is a lot smoother, not tearing as much. That's what we're after. Springs back. Let's do the test. The test is the way forward. Oh, it's still tearing. Damn you, dough. It's not tearing all the way though. It's definitely getting there. Hardly any tearing now. We're going to give it 5 more minutes because, as I said, what you put into this dough you get out. You don't want to rush this. Well, you can rush it, but you don't want to skip this step. You don't want to miss getting your dough to a perfect consistency, because it makes all the difference, it really does. So we're looking for a really smooth surface, no tearing, no ripping, just nice, smooth, stretchy dough that's gonna taste amazing in about 4 hours when it's done. Oh, takes time. Sweaty old day today. Definitely a day for drinking beer on the balcony or sitting next to an open door in the shade and allowing the breeze to catch you. Oh, not one for sitting in the sun. That's a lie. I am one for sitting in the sun, but I'm much more cautious these days with the old visage. Don't want to get any early wrinkles from the sunshine, so I wear my sunblock, I wear my sun lotion, make sure I've got a nice high factor on my face. Wrinkles from the sky, that's what the sun is, wrinkles from the sky. Bear that in mind, everyone. Oh, what am I talking about? Come on, dough. I need you to be done so that I stop talking absolute rubbish to the public. Right, there we go. Now, I think my dough is as good as I'm going to get it without spending another hour massaging it. But it's looking good. It's looking nice and smooth. It's got a nice soft texture to it now. It's springy, it's smooth. It's looking like a normal bread dough. Oh, so I'm putting it into rest, that's it. You've got no more time. You're going into rest. Now we need to rub our bowl with a bit of oil. Since we're using coconut oil, let's use some coconut oil. Rub the bottom of your bowl with some coconut oil, or whatever oil you have. Pop your lovely dough into your bowl. Cover it with some cling film, or if you happen to have a shower cap works great. Hi everyone, hi Eve, how are you? I know, I love my Union Jack apron. I'm just obsessed with it, so I'm keeping it on. There we go, our dough is done and ready to rest. This needs to sit in a nice warm area, not too hot. Don't leave it in direct sunlight, it's going to rise too quickly. Today, the kitchen is warm enough for this, so leave it in a draft-free area. Make sure it is covered with something. You can use a damp tea towel, you can use some cling film, and leave it to rest for an hour. And it's as simple as that. Shall I put it in my cupboard? Yes, it's nice and warm in there. Pop it in the cupboard. Is it warm? Oh, can't really tell. It's so warm in the kitchen. Leave it in a nice warm area. If your kitchen is as warm as mine is today, you can just leave it out on the side. As long as it's covered and it's in a nice warm area with no draft, it will be fine. Right then, step 1 is done. I will see you in 1 hour to look at our dough. So reconvene at 1:45. I'm going to go strip off and get into the garden. That's what I'm going to do with my sun lotion on. Right, well done chaps. If your dough's not quite ready, keep kneading it and then get it into rest. And I will see you at 1:45 for step 2. You will need, oh, I've just realised I've used all my butter. You will need butter, cinnamon and sugar. And I'm going to think of a different alternative to use for mine. But that's what you'll need, butter, cinnamon and your caster sugar to make your filling. So if you're going vegan, use your Trex bread. If not, just use butter. Hiccups. Right, see you in an hour everyone. Ta-ra!